This is the METS POSTCAST, your instant game reaction for the New York Mets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
For the first time this season, the New York Mets have been swept, and it happened at home as they fall to the Tampa Bay Rays by a final score of 9-0, leading to a lot of questions about where this team currently finds themselves. Welcome in to the Mets Postcast here, the Locked On Mets YouTube channel, the Locked On Mets podcast feed. I'm your Postcast host, Chris Schubert, here with you after each and every Mets game throughout the course of the season. Yes, even after a game like today where the Mets suffered their first sweep, shutout for the fourth time this season, and as we mentioned in the title of the video, just looked outmatched today by the Tampa Bay Rays, prompting us to ask a lot of questions. And let's face it, this has felt like things have just stacked on top of one another since the Kodai Senga injury earlier this week, because even that game, the last game of the winning streak that the Mets put themselves on, was an adventure to close out that game, leading right into this weekend, which has been just a lot of bad and at times some very ugly performances from the New York Mets. Let's get into what we will be talking about, and it is the fact that this team's now going to be tested in a big way.
This is what you'll be talking about.
I don't think you need me to break down this game like we normally do on the postcast. I don't think you need me to talk about the Mets only having 5 hits and getting some terrible pitching and going 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position and leaving 12 men on base. I don't think we need to do that dance as we normally do here on the postcast. We can talk about what this series means from a big picture. And big picture, this sweep came at a really bad time for the New York Mets, riding the high of that 6-game winning streak, looking like the best team in baseball, holding the record as the best team in baseball, and brought back to reality a little bit. And I've mentioned it here on the postcast numerous times, the resiliency of this group, that it feels like this team, when they are pushed, when they are tested, when they are knocked down, they do a great job of getting themselves back up. They did not do that at any point across this 3-game series. And now we are really going to see what this team is made of, because this is truthfully the most resiliency they are going to face all season. This is the first time that they haven't been knocked down. They were shoved down by the Tampa Bay Rays. They were knocked onto the floor, and they were kept on the floor by Tampa all weekend. And it leads right in to a big series with Atlanta and a big series with Philadelphia. You cannot have a hangover from this series when you go to Atlanta to face the Braves, when you go to Philadelphia to face the Phillies. So now we'll get to see, how does Carlos Mendoza deal with the first sweep of the season? How does the leadership of this team deal with getting swept for the first time this year, especially because it happened at home? How do they deal with the injuries that have been popping up? Kodai Senga getting hurt, the underperformance from the pitching. How do they dust themselves off? Because it's one thing to dust yourself off from one loss. It's another thing to dust yourself off from back-to-back losses. It is a totally different thing entirely to dust yourself off from getting swept at home. Now, let me make one thing very clear, because I believe the context is required here. This is not a sky is falling moment for this baseball team. I went and looked, and I picked the New York Yankees because they were the other team that I was watching this morning, keeping tabs on what was going around with baseball. Last year, the New York Yankees made it to the World Series. 4 times in the first half last year, they had 3-game losing streaks. 4 times they had losing streaks of at least 3 games. These types of things are going to happen over the course of a 162-game baseball season. You hear me say that ad nauseum here on the postcast, that these things happen. We have to get ourselves out of maybe being football brained and thinking that everything matters to the extreme that 1 week in the NFL does. This was a bad weekend. This is a weekend that this team can't afford to have with what is coming up the rest of this week in Atlanta and in Philadelphia. But guess what? Let's see how they handle it. Let's see if they can pass this test. Let's see if David Peterson, who we've called on this show an ace, can be the ace, can be the stopper that the Mets are going to need him to be when they go and face the Atlanta Braves to start that 3-game series on Tuesday. To me, the exciting part coming out of this is we're going to learn if this team is for real. I know there are a lot of you out there that think there are cracks in the armor that point to the runners and scoring position numbers. I've brought it up. You've pointed to some of the underperformances from the bats. There's some criticism of Carlos Mendoza that exists. I look at this week against the Braves and the Phillies coming out of this series against Tampa as a real, true litmus test for this team. You want to show that you belong. You want to show that you are a World Series contender. Show the response here. So I'm actually looking forward to see how they choose to respond here, because I think very highly of this team. I think the sky is the limit for this team. They are dealing with a lot right now, and we'll get to the main thing that is plaguing them, which is their pitching. But there's nothing like a series like this to potentially wake this team up and get to see what the response from this squad will look like. The pitching, that's the story of the last couple of days. The pitching, which has been their strength, surprisingly, it has been the backbone of this team over the last couple of days, specifically the last 2 days. It has been non-existent. I kind of take the Clay Holmes thing and I put it to the side. He was great over the 5 innings. They just needed to limit him because he felt some type of way coming out of that Colorado start, just felt a little bit more fatigued than normal. And so they put a governor on him for that start. You can understand that. You have a guy that you're making a closer into a starter. He comes to you after that start and says he's not recovering the way he normally does. You err on the side of caution. You got 5 great innings out of him. The last 2 days, you cannot say the same thing. Tyler McGill had the blow-up inning that we've seen from him in the past. And today, Griffin Canning, the walks were there, and it was early on that you gave up the 3 runs, and you just were unable to recover. The pitching staff for this team is showing its signs of mortality. I mean, they just have not been, they've been an immortal group all year long. They just seemingly have shown up every single time out for this squad, and it has been almost surprising how good they've been. They're starting to show signs of, I don't know if it's wearing down, regression to the mean, could be a whole host of different things, but the pitching is starting to show those cracks. And so they're going to need Frankie Montas. They're going to need Sean Manaea. They're going to need David Peterson to step up. They're going to need Clay Holmes to bounce back and get back to being the guy that he was in Colorado and the starts before that, being able to give them length. I still believe in this pitching staff. I still believe that Sean Manaea, when he gets called up from this rehab assignment, is going to be able to be the ace that he was last year. David Peterson is going to be able to continue to do what he's doing. Clay Holmes. This team has enough starting pitching. They just have to start to stack those performances together. Hopefully, Kodai Senga, it is a more of a short-term thing than a long-term thing. They're going to wait 2 weeks before they evaluate him again. Hopefully, right after that, he can start getting back into the flow, and they won't be without him for too long. But pitching. I know it was an over today with the runs, but this team has to get the better pitching if they are going to get back to being the team that we know that they can be. I mean, a ton of walks today. Ended up being 9 walks. Every reliever walked somebody. Canning had 5 walks. You're not going to win a lot of baseball games with that being the case. We'll talk about the offense. We'll talk about the other stuff to keep an eye on, a performance that I want to shout out here, and then we will transition into the rest of this week. A big test for the New York Mets is coming right around the corner. As always, your thoughts welcomed here on the Mets Postcast, so we will get to all of that here on the other side. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money that is left on the table. Think about that last time you had a service emergency, like a busted pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? No, you called the next one on the list. That's why having a reliable business line is so important, and that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. And there's an AI agent that handles those after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer again. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Mets listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonmlb. That's openphone.com/lockedonmlb. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. They've got an easy-to-use website packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, they've got a complete inventory, over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands. You're going to find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Perhaps you need some help with an order. Supply House, they offer expert support, industry-leading service. You're always going to talk to a real person. And for those trade pros out there looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program has some exclusive perks. How about this? Dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it is your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Back here on the Mets postcast here, the Locked On Mets YouTube channel, the Locked On Mets podcast feed. Chris Schubert here with you, recapping a disappointing, annoying, frustrating, whatever word you want to use, easily the worst series of the year for this New York Mets team. Just didn't have it. They looked overmatched at times, didn't have that response in them at all. And they did have one brief moment in this game where they could have made it something, where they could have applied pressure on Tampa instead of making it a walk in the park. It was the bottom of the third inning where they were able to load the bases, trailing 4-0, and they got the tying run to the plate in the form of Pete Alonso. He struck out swinging. The game was over right then and there. I mean, that was the Mets' golden opportunity. If not for a Pete Alonso swing out of the ballpark, at least getting the ball, in the gap to plate a couple of runs to put some pressure on Tampa to have them try to manage and negotiate a 2-run, 3-run lead, maybe just a 1-run lead. But the Mets were unable to do that. And after that chance in the third inning, wasn't a whole lot to write home about. Yeah, the pitching obviously going to be the storyline in this one. But as we mentioned at the top, 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position, 12 men left on base. Could I say that was the problem today? Sure. They didn't stand a chance when you get this type of outing from Griffin Canning. When he only goes 4 1/3, 4 hits, 6 earned runs, 5 walks, just not going to get it done. And so they were behind from the word go. It put Carlos Mendoza and the Mets on the back foot, never able to get the game close enough to where they could try to get back into it. Stuff to keep an eye on here. Shout out Ty Adcock, 1 2/3 innings, got 4 strikeouts, 1 walk, was getting squeezed a little bit by Lance Barksdale. I say a little bit in jest. He was very much getting squeezed from Lance Barksdale behind home plate, but did a good job giving the Mets some bulk. Max Kranick gave the Mets some bulk. Those two guys combined for 3 2/3 scoreless when Griffin Canning doesn't give you a ton of length. Good to see those guys be able to sop up some of that bulk innings that they needed. Look, I am not going to sugarcoat this. I think I'm pretty fair here on the postcast, criticizing this team when things don't go their way and when they play poorly. They played poorly this series. They did not play their A-plus ball, and it does feel like it's been a snowball downhill since Kodai Senga got hurt in the finale against Washington. But you got to make your own luck sometimes, and we'll see if the Mets feel sorry for themselves over the next couple of days. I had somebody ask a question last night about the Mets pressing. I don't think that was the case this weekend. I could see them maybe start to press a little bit now that they've lost 3 in a row. We'll get the answer to that question. And again, right now they are juggling a lot with their pitching staff. They lost Kodai Senga. They've got Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea, who are certainly trending towards coming back, although the numbers for those guys in their rehab starts aren't great. And I don't know what to make a ton of what the numbers look like in rehab starts. Maybe they're trying to work on specific things and they're okay with, the numbers being what they are as they work on, a certain pitch and location, and maybe they go into it with a set plan. So I try not to overreact or get too excited when, a guy had 5 scoreless innings tonight in a rehab start. Oh, he's back. Get him up. He's ready to go. He doesn't need anymore. And again, I try not to do the flip side where they give up 4 runs, 5 runs in 3 1/3. Oh no, are they broken? I try to find a happy medium and just try to let them go through their process and see what it looks like when they get back to the big league level. They're going to get Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea back, and I think it's going to be a huge infusion of some energy into a group that, let's face it, has been asked to carry a heavy burden for this team. Their pitching has carried a heavy, heavy burden while this offense has tried to figure itself out, and there are signs of maybe being overworked, being tired, just being run down. There are just signs of this pitching kind of regressing a little bit. Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill, the 2 big examples. Again, Clay Holmes, I put in a bucket separately. I have no worries about what Clay Holmes is going to be his next time out, just like I have no worries about what David Peterson is going to be his next time out. The rest of the rotation, yeah, I think it's fair to wonder, is Griffin Canning regressing a little bit? Yeah, are we seeing some of the same signs from Tyler McGill that we have seen in years past? So yes, I think it's fair to question those 2 guys and their performances. Right now, you've got a team that has 2 starters that you trust in, with now Senga being down. Don't have much trust in Paul Blackburn the last couple times out for him. Don't have a ton of trust in Tyler McGill. And Canning is, again, showing some signs of being shaky, especially today with the performance that he has. So the Mets have to dust themselves off. The Mets have to show some resiliency. There have been times in the past, and I can think of one year in particular that I won't mention, where the Mets dominated for a large part of the season. They were never really pushed. They were never really put into spots like this where they had to dust themselves off and throw that counterpunch and fight back. And then late in the season, when they were put into that battle, they crumbled. And you and I both know the year that I'm talking about, and you and I both know how that season ended. I don't think this year is that year, but to make us all feel a little bit better that this isn't a repeat of that year, let's see what this week looks like. And let's see how they do against the Atlanta Braves. David Peterson going on the mound. Again, out of everybody in this rotation, that is the exact guy you would want on the mound. Not just because he's coming off of a complete game shutout, but because he has been this team's most reliable, most consistent, and their best starting pitcher all year long. Some other things to keep an eye on. Luis Angel Acuna with a multi-hit game in his first start in a little bit. That was an encouraging sign. Francisco Alvarez got a hit today going the other way in the ninth inning. Perhaps maybe that sparks him. That's it. I mean, that's really the only other stuff that you can really get excited about here in this offense. I mean, Lindor DH today, he went 0 for 3. Soto went 0 for 2, drew a couple of walks. Alonso was 0 for 4. The big guys in this lineup didn't do anything. You were behind the 8 ball from the word go. Just a bad loss all across the board. Just a bad weekend for the New York Mets. And in years past, it takes a lot sooner than June 15th for the Mets to have a bad weekend. The fact that it took this long, we should take as an encouraging sign of how good this team is. But yeah, they have to respond in a big way, or else some serious questions about how far this team can go will arise. We have been kind of keeping an eye on the runners in scoring position, keeping an eye on the pitching staff, and it does feel like those two things are starting to be their kryptonite, their downfall here over the last couple of days. Very much looking forward to the series against Atlanta. It's an off day for the Mets tomorrow. Hopefully they take full advantage of it, clear their minds, and get themselves right before they head to Atlanta for a big series against the Atlanta Braves. We will be right back here on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel and the Locked On Mets podcast feed to break down that first game with David Peterson on the mound. If you are new here, you're joining us for the first time, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so that you are notified when we go live here after each and every Mets game throughout the course of the season. Perhaps you're listening to this later or the next day in the podcast feed. This is my call to action for you. Come on and join us after each and every game. Within 5-10 minutes, not even of the game ending, we're pressing that go live button and we are here hanging out with you, and we love hearing from you here on the postcast. We'll let James have the final word here today on the show. He says Canning, McGill, and Blackburn are the 6th, 7th, and 8th starters in the depth chart. And I think that's a fair comment there from James. Before the season, take us into spring, and I think you would look at those three guys as on the outside looking in. You would look at David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, Sean Manaea. And so the Mets have a 45-27 record, and they have been using their 6 and 7 starters a lot of this season, and their 8th starter, Paul Blackburn, who just came back, they've been using him a little bit as of late. So it shouldn't be a surprise that they may be hitting a rough patch. They may be hitting some shakiness. Again, I will remind you, every team goes through this. The Dodgers, the Yankees last year, the 2 World Series teams, they went through stretches like this. The Mets last year went through stretches like this. Their record this year, much better than where it was a year ago. Their record this year, much better than it was at this time a year ago. So these things happen. You can't let them become something bigger. That's when you have bigger problems on your hands. And we'll see. We will see. Do I think the Mets will let this fester and become something worse? I don't. It's up to them to go out and prove it this week against 2 big opponents in the NL East, especially a team in Philadelphia who has closed the gap and is somewhat breathing down their neck. So should be a fun week of baseball to recap here on the Mets Postcast. We can't wait to do it all with you right here on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel. But that is going to do it for us here, as a disappointing weekend for the New York Mets concludes in style. Shout out to all the Mets dads out there. A happy Father's Day to all of you. And the Mets going to have to dust themselves off, have an off day, try to, reset, clear their heads, and get at it on Tuesday in Atlanta. We will be here to break it all down when they do. Have a good one, Mets fans.